Are we good to go? All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. It's the CTIO Board of Directors meeting of Wednesday, the 10th of July, 2024. We'll start with the regular board meeting roll call, please, Simon.
Chair Stewart.
Here.
Vice Chair Noble.
Here.
Director Erickson.
Here.
Director Gutierrez.
Here.
Director Cook.
Here.
Director Adams.
Here.
And Director Easton is excused.
Okay, thank you very much. Public comment is next, and I understand there's no public comment, so we'll go on to the director's report. Piper Darlington.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Stewart, and good morning to the board.
morning.
Thank you for coming an extra
Yeah.
hour early. I really appreciate it. And again, I apologies about the, reschedule of the retreat, but I think it was still good that we met this week and used the time that was sort of already on everyone's calendar. Simon is going to email out some options for a reschedule where really we can start the deep dive on 184 and some of the other topics that we had slated for the retreat. So look out for some information from Simon. A few items. I realized I was looking at my calendar and we just met a few weeks ago, but I did have a few items to update the board on. On the evening of June 25th, I attended the 5th stakeholder workshop for the I-270 project. This was really focused on, they're looking at several options, one of which includes an express lane option. So this workshop was really focused on learning more about express lanes. There was a lot of great participation from local elected officials, the trucking industry, community members. So it was a great opportunity for me to talk more about field questions about who is CTIO, what do we do? What do we do with toll revenue? How do we operate express lanes? So it was a really good chance for me to be out there and engaged as they're still exploring options for the I-270 corridor. So I certainly let them know that I'd be happy to come back anytime for any of those public meetings. On June 26th, we were fortunate enough to host 35 people from the Sacramento Area Council of Governments at CDOT. They came to Colorado. They were hosted by Dr. Cog, and really they just formed the Capital Area Regional Tolling Authority. And so they were in addition to other things, but so they were very interested in coming to CTIO to learn more about who we are, what we do, the equity program, sort of, they're kind of just getting their feet wet and sort of all things tolling. So they sort of made a pit stop here for lunch. And I sort of gave them our little CTIO 101. It was a very interesting group to talk to, but they're looking at, they toured some affordable housing projects as well with Dr. Cog and kind of had a whirlwind tour here in Colorado. So I certainly let them know that we would be open to any future, engagements with them or any, sort of peer exchange. So that was a great opportunity. Most of the team was busy in the back office procurement scoring. So I fielded all the questions alone, but I think it went very well. So those were the few updates from me for this month. Good. I'm happy to answer any other questions from the board.
That's great. Does anyone have a question? Comments? Well, thank you. Sounds like you were busy.
Everyone's been very busy the last few weeks. Yes.
I do want to say that 270 is so important to the area that I represent. So I'm really glad that they're bringing you into the discussion. It's been delayed a little bit and it's been frustrating to the local governments there, but I think whatever comes out of all these discussions is going to be a good solution for a very complicated, challenging area.
Yeah. I got some hard questions, on why express lanes and, so I think just, they're still looking at all options.
Yeah.
Right? They haven't cleared an express lane.
Right.
Option. So I think it was a good chance just to talk about how we've been utilizing express lanes, knowing that there is still a lot of unknowns out there. So it was a good opportunity.
Yeah, I hope they recognize the importance of express lanes to transit efficiency and effectiveness. So I think that's a big piece of it. Well, thank you. Construction operations maintenance questions are next. Any board members have any questions? Director Gutierrez.
Just a quick one, and I may have missed this somewhere along the way in my absences here the last couple of months. The tolling on 6, 7, and 8. Update on when those are scheduled to start. That's the question I get most of the time.
Do we have enough? I think we're still targeting end of the year. We're pushing really hard.
End of the year. Okay.
Others?
I have something for the board. So good morning, board.
Good morning.
So a few weeks ago, I was offered a promotional opportunity in Region 1. So I'll be leaving CTAO and joining Region 1 next week. Appreciate all my time. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time in CTAO. I've learned so much from everybody at this table. And I just thank you all.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, we'll miss you. Thank you. Current agenda item is resolution 447 approving the June 24th minutes. Did everyone get a chance to look at the minutes? If so, a motion is in order.
I move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. That passes unanimously. We'll note that Travis isn't here, so he's not in the vote. Express Lane Safety Enforcement Program review, and that's Piper.
Yeah, so I'll just kick it off, but really, we have various folks around the table are going to talk as part of this presentation. I know we sent it out to the board, so it's lengthy, right? But I think, we initially planned on doing a deep dive into this topic as part of the board retreat, and we were really ready to go with this topic. So I think especially given the recent public comment that we've received, we really wanted to move ahead with making sure that we had a workshop on this topic this month. And we're coming up on almost the year anniversary, for Mexel.
Wow.
And then a few months later for I-25 and C-470. So it's actually a really good time for us to bring this back to the board to let you know how all aspects of how the program is working. So I think we're gonna, focus on just a reminder, especially for Director Erickson, who's kind of new to the table here, what the goals were when we set out to do this, right? And sort of a refresh around that, the why, focusing on Tim's going to cover some topics around communications, as well as some future plans. Kelly is going to do a deep dive on sort of what we've learned so far, what the data is showing. And then we're really going to talk a little bit more in preparation for the executive session, which will be handled by the AG's office. And we have a special guest at the table from the AG's office, Josh Cocky, who's here, but I think really talking a little bit more about the dispute process. So publicly, we'll chat a little about how that's working, and then that will tee up nicely for Carla, Josh, and Kathy to sort of do a deeper dive and address some of the specific questions and information you all have been getting in the public sessions and public comment over the last couple of board meetings. So please feel free to ask questions. We've tried to make this pretty comprehensive, but there are some follow-up things that will be coming back to the board on in the next couple of months on this program as well. So I'll turn it over to Kelly to kind of get things kicked off.
Well, good morning, board. As Piper mentioned, today the staff is going to present you with the review of the first year of operations of our Express Lane Safety Enforcement Program. Next, Simon. Okay, so you're on that slide. Just go ahead, no worries. So the Safety Enforcement Program was born out of the driver behavior that we saw on our eastbound Mountain Express Lane. The Mountain Express Lane is only open on weekends and holidays, and the rest of the time, the shoulder continues to be used by motorists as the breakdown lane. And because the lane was only 11 feet wide, only 2-axle vehicles, which are less than 25 feet in length, are allowed to use that express lane. So, however, our tolling equipment on that eastbound Mountain Express Lane, we did not have the westbound open at that time. So the only data we had was from the Mountain Express Lane eastbound. So, but our tolling equipment was telling us that drivers were not abiding by those rules for Mexel. They were using it when it was closed, and we felt that was a risk of an accident where someone is using when the Mountain Express Lane was closed and it's functioning as the breakdown lane and people were using it when it's closed, we ran the risk of someone who was not following the rules, trying to get up to the mountains in a hurry for some reason, and running over someone who was using the lane as that emergency breakdown lane. They might have had a vehicle that overheated, they might have had a flat tire, but we really felt that, the data was showing us that it was just an accident waiting to happen. So if you want to go to the next slide. So not only were they using it when it was closed, but they were also using it with there are RVs that were longer than 25 feet long, with trucks that are pulling boats or campers, or even we had, big semis like Amazon, using the Mountain Express lanes, even though we had the signs telling them not to. And through our reports, we could identify, our tolling equipment could tell us who these people were. They were using it when it was closed, but the tolling equipment is always working, so we knew their license plate, we knew their transponder number. We could look in the back office and see who to send violations to, but we did not have the statutory authority to do that. So we were in a position where the data was telling us that these rules were being broken, but we did not have the wherewithal and the authority to do any enforcement. And so if you want to go to the next slide, Simon. And not only with the Mountain Express lanes, because all of the express lanes, except for the I-25 Central Express lane, which is that reversible lane, that's only one of our express lanes that actually had barriers between the express lane and the general purpose lanes, as you can see on this slide. So my favorite saying is paint never stopped anybody from crossing the line. So, so we knew that we also had this issue in the entire express lanes network because people were either going into or out of the express lane trying to weave around the toll gantries. So we didn't know who those people were because they obviously were not being recorded by our tolling equipment. But they, they were weaving in and out, not just to avoid the toll, because we did record people paying tolls, but we also saw them weaving, but people would be using the express lane as a passing lane. And so we knew that we had a very large problem across the network, and we wanted to try to find ways to make the express lanes more safe. So Simon, you want to go to the next slide? So this is the chart. The first two charts were the ones on the Mountain Express lane. This is the accident count by express lane facility, and you can see one of these is an outlier, and that was our I-25 segment 2 section. It was having a lot more accidents in that section than the rest of the express lanes network combined. So that's just another thing of our data that is telling us we needed to do something to make these express lanes safer. So if you want to go to the next slide, Simon. And because of the large volume of people that were breaking the laws or breaking the don't cross the line, don't drive into New Mexico when it's closed, the large volume made it very impractical for a state patrol or a sheriff's office or a police department to try to enforce it with all the volume of violations. And some of our express lane corridors, such as the I-25 segment 2 express lane, it didn't have any place for an enforcement zone where if the police officers and the sheriff and the CSP wanted to do enforcement, there was nowhere in that express lane corridor for them to set up and do enforcement. So we just, as part of our safety, we wanted to remove the peace officer aspect of it, because in Colorado, thankfully not on any of our express lanes, but we've had in the last decade several state patrol officers that were outside of their vehicle writing tickets to violators, whether they were speeders or drunk driving or whatever, that while they were outside the safety of their vehicle, they were hit and killed. So we didn't want that to happen on our watch, where, these officers were leaving that safety of their vehicle just to enforce people weaving. So if you want to go to the next slide, Simon. So beginning issues that we just saw slides on, we needed legislative changes to catch the weavers, but we also needed a technology solution that was beyond our traditional tolling equipment in order to catch the weavers. So you want to go to the next slide, Simon? So, you are stuck.
I'll get it back.
Okay, I will catch it. We should be on the long and winding road. There we go. Okay, so like I mentioned, there was a long winding road to get the legislative approval. And we leaned heavily into the message of safety enforcement and emphasizing how unsafe it was to have the people weaving and using the Mountain Express lanes when they were closed. So this actually resonated well with the lawmakers and the public. And so we finally got a bill signed into law in 2022. And that dual track, we were, while we were getting the legislative changes and the rulemaking done, we were also exploring technology options that would help us, or would make it possible for us to catch those weavers, because the weavers were weaving around our traditional tolling equipment. We did not have any way to identify who those weavers were and send the civil penalties to them. So next slide, Simon. So all of this led to our safety enforcement program launch on June 21st of 2023 on the eastbound and westbound lanes of the Mountain Express lane, because by this time we did have an express lane in the westbound direction. And we followed that in September with the program going live on C-470 and I-25 north between US 36 and State Highway 7. Next slide. The technology solution that we chose was the Blissway Wally, which is a wireless autonomous lane enforcement device. Blissway designs, manufactures, installs, and maintains the Wally devices, and each Wally is fully self-contained and is composed of the following components. There's cameras for image capture, there's triggers and the magnetometer that is a little puck sensor in the pavement. We have a 4G cellular connection that's encrypted and redundant that sends all of the technology to the cloud. The cloud host is 100% cloud, not any on-site premises data storage. And all of this data is stored in the cloud for about 30 days. On the permanent storage is on the cloud, but the actual Wallies themselves can store about 30 days worth of transactions physically there. And it is completely solar. There is no need. This technology solution worked because it was solar, it was cellular, it was completely self-contained. It did not have to tap into the CDOT network. It did not require construction to install it like normal tolling equipment is. So this is a hardware light and a very software intensive solution that Blissway is supplying for us. So at this time, I'm going to pass this over to Tim Hoover to present his team's public outreach and communications activity for the last 12 months.
Good morning, board members. So we knew we had a big job ahead of us to do public outreach and communications. We very thoughtfully tried to make sure that the public had an ample amount of warning and notice about this. And we tried to leverage those grace periods to get as much earned media as possible. So as you've heard, we leaned heavily into the message of safety. This was all about safety. We wanted to save lives. We think we're going to long-term have data that will show that. And we wanted to just keep broadcasting that message. We also wanted to make sure that it was not just Coloradans who heard about this, but also our many visitors. And so we, next slide, please. We turned to a lot of strategies to reach many audiences. Of course, earned media, as I mentioned, we did stakeholder outreach, everybody from the I-70 Coalition to a lot of other organizations that could help us spread the word. We did online influencer partnerships, which I have to say are pretty darn good. What is the I-70 one? I-70 Things, I think. We did, of course, paid advertising, which you've seen. A lot of social media. We had our VMS messages, website updates, and tried to make sure all the lawmakers were kept in the loop. We also did some geo-targeting ads via people's phones, so that if you're, driving through a corridor and you're listening to your favorite podcast, when it comes time for an ad, poof, you hear from us. So we've done as many things as we could think of to basically carpet bomb the state with this message and then try to reach others. Next slide, please. So this is our earned media results. This would be the news. Now you can see that aquamarine arc there that says online and print. But so obviously reaching a lot of people online is very effective. But of course, that stuff is very connected to the other colors. If you have radio and TV, those also can spawn more of that online and print audience. And so we really tried to reach as many news outlets as possible. We got what I believe was an enormous amount of positive coverage, especially from TV. And it helped set us up. So we got a lot of warning out there. Next slide, please. And you've seen some of our paid advertising. Of course, the one on the left there, that's the one we've been using on the billboards. We find that it is succinct and effective. And so people have gotten the word. The one on the right is more for online, and it's a little bit more nuanced and meant to be a little playful. But it's meant to reinforce that message. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we've continued to work very closely with stakeholders and organizations along all of our corridors. We've hit everybody. I mean, DMV, done rental car companies, insurance companies, driving schools, tourism, car dealerships. I think we've done motorcycle clubs too. And then I should add, we have this survey that we've done every other year, which has been extremely helpful for understanding, customer perceptions about our customer service, but also perceptions about safety. And to that end, here is our most recent, the results you can see from our most recent survey show that there's even greater support for what we're doing. So it's important to, recognize that there is high public support for what we're doing. You can see that second item there, express lane rules should be more strictly enforced, had jumped up 14%. We think in no small part that was due to some, earned media coverage that we gotten talking about the issue. And from, endlessly trolling these online, postings and stuff, the reaction story, I can tell you that the comments that I see reflect a lot of people saying, hooray, thank you for doing this. I'm so happy that this is finally being done. Very few people feel sorry for violators, especially when they're ones who are frankly brazenly just using it as a passing light. And a lot of people recognize the danger in this. So we hope that bottom item, which was an added question, it wasn't on the 2021 survey. We're hoping that awareness increases even further as we go along. Next slide, please. So to that end, I want to tell you that we've done a lot of stuff, but we are now entering a much bigger phase where we're going to be spending a significant amount of money, far more than we've ever spent before, on public outreach. We're using some of our safety enforcement revenue to fuel this, and we want to drive violations as low as they're going to go. And as Kelly's going to tell you in a minute, we have done a Herculean job so far. I'm honestly surprised at how effective it's been. But you're gonna see, ads on TV, online, a lot of the stuff you've already seen. And I think especially, important is we're gonna be doing a video animation campaign. Now, we considered for about half a second going out and trying to film this live, and we thought, probably not a good idea. If we have an accident, maybe not that great. So we're creating very high quality animation, the kind that you might like see in one of these racing video games that your kids play. And we're going to show very realistic animation of how to, do's and don'ts for express lanes. These will show up in the ads, but they'll also be on websites so that people can observe them. And we hope to just have diagrams, simple things where maybe you don't want to watch video, but you just want to sort of see, how do I handle a situation where, there's a dotted line on this side, but a solid line on the other side. What are the rules around that? All of this, of course, is stuff that, you're supposed to be educated on in driver's ed, but maybe people have forgotten it, or maybe they're not using these type of lanes as often as they once did, or for whatever reason, these will be helpful reminders of how to do this. And the video assets will actually stay with us for a good while, because we essentially are having to create a universe in this video animation. And so we can sort of keep our little make-believe world and use it in the future if we need to. I think that's everything. Is that right?
Could we each have an avatar?
I will get your car and animate it in there.
So thank you, by the way. I'm really delighted about what we're doing from a safety standpoint and communications. And I'm hopeful that of the money we collect in fines, that net of the cost of the equipment and other support, that we're plowing the money back into communications on this and not really using, I'd hate to think that some of this might be perceived as CTIO trying to make additional money. I'd rather see it go back into communications.
Right.
Around making sure that people understand the rules and they're abiding by it. We're going to collect more money with dynamic pricing and other things. So I don't feel like we need the money from the fines in order to cover more of CTIO. So I'm hopeful.
Right.
I'm hopeful that I said it in a way that assumes that's what we're doing.
That, so Piper and Kelly, we talked, I don't know, a long time ago, and we all agreed that we wanted to use a big chunk of the revenue to effectively drive down revenue on the safety enforcement program. And
Right.
we would love it if we made $0. Well, this way probably wouldn't like it. So
Well, we need to cover the cost.
But we know that's not realistic, that there's always going to be some violators out there. But we would greatly love to see it, even less of them. And we know if we just wanted to collect money, we wouldn't say a thing publicly about the program.
Right.
We would not have any advertising. We just very quietly let people violate. Anyway, so thank you for your comments, and that is exactly our plan. Thank you.
Yeah, see, just to.
Go ahead.
on that, did I see that you're dedicating it all to safety programs net of the administrative cost? Is that correct?
I don't think that's exactly right, but Kelly could probably speak to that.
Piper's gonna speak to it.
Yeah, so, and that's part of the reason why I included a slide, because, there's been a lot of news stories lately about, the amount of violations we've issued, what we've collected. So I really wanted the board to understand, this is exactly what this looks like so far. And to Tim's point, right, we hit this kind of peak, right? And it is sort of leveling off, right? The violation rate is leveling off, but we're about to open, this is gonna go live on Central 70, it's gonna go live on South Gap. It's gonna be on 6, 7, and 8. So, right now, the civil penalty revenue is treated just like toll revenue. It stays in the corridors where it's collected. On the corridors where we have debt, this all flows in with the tolls to support operations. So it is going to support the corridors more broadly. And I think to Tim's point, right, that's why we do have flexibility to say we could dedicate a large chunk of this to the communications and outreach efforts, right? And I think we are hopeful that we drive down this source of revenue, right? Because one, we're going to reduce leakage. So people are actually just going to hopefully pay the toll. So it's going in to support corridor operations. And it really follows that same earned in a corridor, stays in a corridor. So all the civil penalty revenue we're collecting on I-25 is staying, all that net revenue is staying within I-25. So we can reinvest it in the safety improvement project they're working on, advertisement and communications work. So there's not a perfect answer for that, but I would say right now it's available. It's staying in the corridors where we're collecting it. We are looking at creative ways that we can use it, right? With the videos, the TV advertising, more aggressive communications outreach. Knowing that there's some specific safety projects coming down the pipeline in some of these corridors where we could reinvest some of those dollars. But right now it is helping the corridors because it's going to support operations more generally. So.
Can I make the other two, I like the two slides that you were talking about. The one with the vehicle that crosses the line is absolutely clear to me. I'm not so sure about the other one that is a little bit cute with the raft. Yeah, I'm not as happy with that one as I am with the other that really shows people crossing the line.
Noted.
To me, I'm not a marketing, not a communications guy.
I think the
would-
one on the right was a little left over from earlier campaigns and we kind of recycled it.
Eye-catching.
We do think, yeah, and really the one on the left was too, but I think we sort of distilled it better in that new messaging. And so that is the one that people see on billboards, and I think it's probably the one that's been the most effective.
Yeah, I think the left clearly gets the message across to me. On the right, if I look at it real quick, I think it's something about something other
Yeah.
than what it might be.
Well, that looks like my car, but it is not. It's not my car. What I want to say about the continued marketing communications piece. I've heard from a number of people that there's a confusion about when you can enter and when you can exit.
Okay.
And we all know you can't cross the double lines.
Correct.
What I have been in a carpool with someone who crossed the line with a dashed line next to it. That's a no-no.
Right.
But it's not clear that that's a no-no. And the same thing when you're exiting, when you have a line on the left, that's a solid line, and then a dashed line that means someone can enter. People sometimes think they can also exit because it's not a double line, and that's what I'm hearing. So maybe those kinds of things have to be focused on for people who haven't used this managed lane yet. And
Right.
maybe as we go forward, because that's what I'm hearing from segment 2 people is, well, I don't know when I'm ever supposed to get in there. So it's a little confusing that we say cross the line, meaning,
Sure.
everybody knows double line, but cross any line really, right?
Yeah. Well, generally.
Unless it's a dash line.
Generally, any solid line. The
Any
law-
solid
the law
line.
Does allow for certain instances where you can cross a solid line,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
basically don't do it. And so we want to be more direct in addressing these instances where you've got the dash line on
Yeah.
one side of the solid line, entrances and exits. And I believe there's already a diagram on our website about
Yeah.
that. It's just that we want to push it out even
Yeah.
more, maybe get video on that. And maybe there's some special, earned media effort that we could put into that. But some of these things are more nuanced and don't make a snappy slogan. And we, of course, had the vast and overwhelming number of our violations, I think, are double line violations, unless you guys tell me otherwise. But that's really our big issue. And so we wanted to just make that the most forward-facing message.
Well, I've seen you on TV and you're unflappable. You're doing a great.
I look flappable in it, Mike.
Yeah, well, but you don't look flappable.
You just haven't
You're
seen it on
unflappable.
video.
Yeah, yeah.
Outtakes.
Just a question about targeting. As these different sections and segments go live with the safety program, are you able to target regions, that particular region, with additional messaging?
Yeah, I think so. We
And-
target basically through online marketing. You can target, 6 foot tall lumberjacks, whatever you want. I mean, you can really, from Westminster, I mean, maybe there's not a lot in Westminster, but you can really drill down and get these very specific segments. And with the geo-targeting, you can get who were literally driving and listening to a podcast or some other online this or that, where they would have these geo-targeted ads.
And I guess my real question is that if that is what you're doing?
Yes,
Okay,
we've done that in the past and we'll do more of it. This just, frankly, we just have more money to spend and we just do more of everything and some stuff we couldn't do before, including TV advertising, because it's very, very expensive.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're looking for yield, you always go to online first. But with TV, we feel that we can reach other audiences and that it will help spawn even more online.
Great.
I'm sorry. Do you find that, I mean, how do you reach people who are traveling through as tours and you don't have? the
We
ability
could do that through geo-targeting. We can do it through tourism, organizations and agencies. We can do it through influencers. You know, there's a lot of people coming to, there's a great, Facebook group called Colorado Day Trips or something like that. It's tons of people find that, and use it for a trip in Colorado, like, and asking others, hey, where do I, you know, go for the best hot springs or whatever? And so there's a lot of things that you can do, but it's gonna be mostly online. We can do some of it through rental car companies, you know, having them help carry the word. Because I think they don't want their customers to have to get crossways, you know, it doesn't help their bottom line.
Yeah, I was worried if we were snagging more, we're just unaware, in the I-70 corridor especially.
Well, and we definitely want to work on that, but it's, you know, our numbers unfortunately tell us that it's overwhelmingly Coloradans. I mean, 90+% who are the violators, so.
Okay.
Director Noble and then Director Erickson.
Yeah, I just wanted to second what Chair Stewart said about your appearance on TV. There was a 9 News segment that I watched and they had some questions. They were exploring the topic, but at the end they came around to, but everybody agrees this is important. Everyone we hear from says how scary it is for people to be entering when you're going faster than the general traffic in the express lane. And so not only is this reflecting back to the community what their concerns actually are, but your work to get the message out there has really seeped in. So the fact that the arc of that 3-minute piece ended on such a positive note that everybody agreed this was really important, I think owes a lot to your work.
Thank you. I hope it stays that way. I hope the coverage stays that way.
That's great. Director Erickson?
Yeah, hello. I think you might have actually already answered my question. I was curious about the violators, the residents versus people from out of state, which you just spoke about. And then I guess my other question is drilling down a little bit more to the campaign with rental car companies. I'm curious what that looks like. I'm not as familiar with that.
And I'm sorry, I'm not that prepared to speak about it. I think we have been placing it's either takeaways at their stations or their rental car, you know, counters, or we've been asking them to give information to their customers, maybe some of both. I'm sorry, I don't have that with me right now, but I think that's it. I think they've been notifying their customers about this. So hopefully that helps some.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, shall we continue?
All right. Let's see. Yeah, so, this section, we're gonna dive into the number of violations issued in the past 12 months.
400,000.
So here's the breakdown of warnings and civil penalties by corridor. You can see that we gave relatively far fewer warnings because those warnings were only for a 30-day period, whereas the rest of the civil penalties were for a full 12 months of data. And that is through July 2nd. So we, as Tim was just mentioning, we believe those that got warnings, they acted as, you know, not just social media, but even just word of mouth to their neighbors, you know, so a very low tech, hey, I got one, don't do what I did, you know, so we do think that between the social media and just the word of mouth from people that are getting these violations, that is also contributing to get the word out that cross the line, pay the fine. If we're gonna go to the next slide, Simon. So as of June, we had issued violations to almost 325,000 cars with unique plates. So this is not the total number of violations issued. This is the total number of license plates, unique license plates that received a civil penalty. And that's about 4.5% of all registered vehicles in the state. And so even though we see that we gave out 325,000 violations, those are actually about 10% of the number of people that are using the express lane. So it may sound like we've issued a lot, but in reality, in the big picture, only about those 325,000 cars represent about 10% of our express lane traffic. And most of our violations are for weaving. If you want to go to the next slide, Simon. So earlier in the presentation, I showed the bar charts with the that really showed before the program started how many violations our toll equipment was capturing. This chart shows on the high point, so the closed lane violations in Mexel, eastbound, we had, prior to the safety enforcement program, we had 97,000 eastbound and about 68,000 westbound. Since the program started, we've brought the number of closed lane violations on the westbound direction down to 782, and on the eastbound, 762. And then for the chart on the right, the vehicles on the Mountain Express lane using it with their campers, their semi trucks, the eastbound went from 9,726 to 5. And then we don't have as much data on westbound because it's only been in operation for a little bit over a year, but westbound we dropped from 646 down to 0. So I think these charts really show on the original express lane that brought these safety concerns to us, how the safety enforcement program in the last 12 months has really hit at those identified safety issues and have definitely made a difference in that Mountain Express lane corridor. I'm going to go to the next slide. So across the express lanes corridor that are involved in the safety enforcement program, currently, we're seeing about an 80% drop in the violation rate from when the program started, essentially in June for Mountain Express Lane and September for C470 and I-25. We can tell that we've dropped the number of violations that we've sent out by 80% in the last 12 months from the program. If you want to go to the next slide. So the good news is that more than 80% of the drivers who did get a violation, a single violation, did not commit anymore. So 80% are only, they're getting that first violation, they've learned their lesson, and they have definitely changed their driving behavior. But for those who do commit additional violations, 65% of those are only committing that second violation, and they haven't moved into a more habitual violator state where they've got 3 or more violations. And we do have a group of hardcore violators that our data is showing. We do have a driver in a Cadillac who has amassed a whopping 137 violations in the last 12 months. And they owe the state thousands of dollars. That was a Cadillac, but we've been able, our data is now showing that although, high-end luxury automobiles make up only a tiny proportion of violations, these vehicles are statistically more likely to commit multiple violations. So it's very interesting. We have a abundance of data and we're able to kind of gather insights from that data. So for your information, McLaren's are the number 1 vehicle on the list that is the most likely, they've been voted most likely to violate multiple times. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'm going to turn this over to Piper to go over this slide.
For sure. And we did touch on this a little bit, right? And I think some of why I wanted to put this slide in here, right, resulted from, the 9 news.
Actually, could I just,
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure.
I'm assuming on that Cadillac, when they get ready to renew their plate, that's when everything comes together. Is that-
Yes.
So
Yes.
they will have a debt. So that's basically in a year that this accumulation occurs. It's not something, because the systems would just throw them out when they get ready to get a new plate.
Yes, we are working on our connection to the Department of Motor Vehicles so that the system will automatically through an interface, when a vehicle reaches a certain status or a certain aging in the system, that it will automatically send over to the DMV. Don't let this person re-register.
Ever.
Yeah, they won't be able to re-register that vehicle until they pay. So, there is a light at the end of the tunnel for that person, and it's gonna be a train. So, I will let you.
Oh, yeah. Was there a follow-up question?
No, that was
Okay.
it. Thank
No,
you.
and we don't need to spend too much time on this, but I think I just given the press around, how many violations we've assessed, what we've collected, especially in the 9 news story, I just wanted to make sure the board had real factual information on the amount of cash we've collected in the door, what we've spent, for our operator to operate the system, to collect the violations, what we spent on legal support, and that's really for our administrative law judges. And then what we've spent really on overhead, staff time, consultant time, AG time, to come up with really kind of what we're sort of netting. And really just, 50% is really going towards our cost, of what we're collecting. So I think, to your question, Director Cook, that net revenue, that's obviously a total. It's not
Yeah.
broken out by corridor, but all of that net really is staying in the corridors where it's collected, and we're reinvesting it in communications. It's going to support operations and would be available for kind of future safety projects. So that's sort of a snapshot of where we are today.
Director Noble?
Yeah.
I've got it.
Yes, a question, and this is sort of for the future. We don't have to go into it now, but I wanted to put a placeholder here. Certainly the Blissway operations, installing the Wallies, maintaining the Wallies, moving the Wallies, all these things, that's an operational expense. But they're also behaving as the back office, like they're issuing the fines, and that will move in-house when we have our back office. So as we kind of move forward, both for normal tolling fees and for safety enforcement program, I'd like to understand what cost we'll avoid by an outside entity being our back office when we've invested so significantly in becoming our own
Yeah.
back office.
Before you get to the back off, can I just address one thing? Just to provide a couple of other points too, Blissway installed and got that program stood up for 0 cost to CTIO. So, that number would have been a lot higher if we had, because they were a startup, right? We had a relationship with them through the pilot agreement. So a lot of that initial work was done really at sort of 0 upfront cost to the state and at Blissway's own risk. So I just wanted to also clarify that on the kind of capital piece. The operations piece also includes, it does include maintenance of the equipment, all of that, but a big portion of it is really variable, right? It's based on how many violations we're collecting. It also includes the collections agency that they've gone, so doing all of the customer service work, all of the mailing, all of the collections of those fines, remitting that to CTIO. So that operations line not just includes Blissway, but it does include the collections agency that they've partnered with to kind of help us on the back end of the program. So just wanted to provide some clarification, and then maybe Kelly can add like what would move what would change with the new back office?
What would change with the new back office is going to be the amount that we pay monthly for back office support. There's, the back office costs currently, Blissway has a fixed cost that is per month. That kind of keeps the lights on, keeps the phones so they can answer the phones, based on, the people that aren't paying. And then we pay a per violation amount for only the ones that are paid. So the fixed cost, they take care of getting everything out the door, answering the phones, making the payments. We pay per violation that's paid, and we also have a adjudication. They earn a portion of the adjudication fee of $30 because they provide all of the pre-court, the pre-administrative hearing, whether that's a requested hearing or a default hearing. They review all of the, for each violation, they review, make sure that the wallies were working and check the logs. They put together, evidence packages with affidavits. So, that again is another variable cost to how many people are requesting hearings, how many people aren't paying, and so their civil penalties go into this default. So those are the costs that are going to either be greatly reduced in our back office or completely go away. So the fixed back office cost is going to completely go away. We also pay a monthly fee for the Wally equipment, and it is it varies based on the express lane corridor, and it's based on how many Wallies are in that corridor. So that will definitely remain as a cost that we're going to continue to pay to Blissway once we have our new back office. But the monthly back office fee is going to go away. The civil penalty that we portion that we pay to Blissway is going to be greatly reduced because they're no longer doing the evidence packages. They're no longer answering the phones. They're basically, it's just going to be paying to support getting that violation data from their Wallies into our new back office. So that cost goes down. So we are hoping to ingest this program into our new back office and realize the efficiencies of not having two back offices. But we also felt that the safety in the express lanes was a priority to start sooner rather than later. So this Blissway back office is a very temporary thing so that we could get the safety enforcement program started in 2023 instead of when our back office is ready around 2026. So, but that was a great question on what's gonna change in the
Well,
future.
that's a great question. Director Adams?
So here's my big problem here with all of this, Kelly. When I hear you say that we have an 80% rate of people who cross the line, get a bill for a fine, and then I look at the actual collection rate on this other page where we billed, and I assume this is over a 2-year period, but I could be, this is over 1 year, where we've actually billed people $44 million, and we have only collected 21 or 22. So to me, that is a very low collection rate from people who ordinarily would be expected to really pay, because they tend to have a tendency to comply. So they get a fine and a bill, and they don't commit the sin again. So I'm assuming that a lot of the difference between the 21 million and the 45 million almost is good money that is going to be paid at some point. But you said it's a 30-day period that they have to pay the fine after they get the invoice. Is that correct? So why is it that we haven't seen a better result than what I'm looking at?
Couple of
From
things.
people who would ordinarily be inclined to write the check and pay. They're like me, if I get one of those notices, I just write the check and pay it, so I don't pay is there an upcharge? If I don't pay it in 30 days, I pay more?
Yeah.
So you would think that this should be really good money here.
20 days, yeah. So a couple of things, before we went into the program, the collection agency that is doing the back office operations for us gave us an estimate of a $30 or a 30% collection rate. So the fact that we're at 50% is before we've started any collections activity. This is just mailing them out a civil penalty. And we are aging into getting collections operations and a B&B hold process. We have not started that process yet, but just sending out the one notice to them, we are getting about a 50%. And then once we have,
As a guy who's collected a lot of receivables, I mean, billions of dollars over his
Yeah.
lifetime, I think anybody who says to me a 30% collection rate, I would be really disappointed to hear that. Even if I were getting 50%,
Yeah.
I would still think that was low. From people who ordinarily probably pay their bills and they take care of things, and someone sitting there with, with an invoice in their hands, I would think we should still be doing better, just my personal
Right.
opinion.
well, we are hoping that once the collections part of the workflow starts, that this number will continue to increase. And we, again, haven't reached the end of the workflow where they're B&B hold.
Just to follow.
Yeah.
The increase from the people who owe us the 23 million or 24 million, are you talking about going forward?
From this number going forward, we are hoping.
So you think a lot of the difference here between 21 and 45 is collectible?
Yes, I do.
I think it is too,
Yeah,
by the
no,
way.
I accept it. We're not
If you
writing it
gave
off.
me, if you gave it to me as a collection agency, I would be thrilled to get that kind of deal.
Yeah.
Personally, because I think it probably should be highly collectible.
Well, collection agency activity has not started yet.
Ah,
That's what
so
I'm trying to
we
say.
have not started.
We have not started that yet.
Thank
This
you.
is just, you got your bill, you didn't pay it in 30 days. You go either request a hearing or you go into default. So we're working through this workflow. We have not, we're only about halfway through. We've done warnings, we've sent,
No, that clarification
Yeah,
makes
no,
a world of
makes
difference,
sense.
because I was gonna say, man, that's
No,
a
no,
lot
no.
of good money there.
nope, we have not even sent them. And I'm gonna discuss that in later slides.
Then we could give this gentleman,
Please don't give me that job.
not the collection job, I'm saying the job of spending it, once we get it,
I like that.
on better communication.
So.
Thank you, though, that little clarification makes a world of difference to me.
Perfect, good. You done?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, so we're gonna go into what kind of feedback we've received in the past 12 months. So, we've tracked the feedback that's come to us from various sources, since the program's inception. And of all that feedback that we've seen, we are seeing 4 common themes. There's the ingress and egress zone confusion that, Director Stewart mentioned. There's feedback about our dispute process, where we have feedback about the amount of the fines, and feedback about the program needs to be more flexible. So I want to hand this over to John Gregory, and he is going to talk to the board about what CTIO has been doing to address the ingress and egress confusion.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Simon, you can jump right to the first
I'm gonna
one.
make you speak up because I cannot hear you.
Sure. I'll try and stand tall and enunciate. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the ingress egress study. We received a lot of comments from across all the express lane corridors about the geometry of the ingress egresses. They were too short, or they felt too short to the drivers, or they felt like they didn't have enough distance from the egress to the highway exit. So we started looking at this. We wanted to make sure, first of all, that we didn't have any substandard or non-compliant geometry in our ingress egresses. So, looking at the AASHTO and FHWA guidelines, the minimum that is recommended, or the minimum standard set, is 500 feet per lane change. So just to explain that a little bit, if you're crossing 2 GP lanes to get to an exit, that'd be 1,000 feet that you would need distance-wise to meet the minimum per the federal standards. They don't give a lot of guidance, for, or specific guidance related to how that might change with speed or traffic congestion, or it's largely left to the design engineer's judgment. So we were looking across the express lanes and talking to some of the design engineers and found that, you know, there were rule of thumbs that different firms were using. They ranged from maybe 800 feet per lane change up to like 1,200 feet per lane change. So I'll say we did not identify at this point any substandard designs, but the inconsistency was an issue that we wanted to resolve. So we partnered with Rami and Iron Stripe Solutions to start studying all of the corridors. And so the study parameters, the scope of that study was to inventory all of our existing ingress and egress locations, all of the geometry related to that, the length of the egress, the distance to the interchange. And at that point, I brought this to the board a few months back early in the year and said, we don't have any substandard designs out there. But we are looking at trying to improve that driver comfort level. So that was the next part of this study was we did the field observations, driving all of the ingress egresses in the express lanes corridor at the AM peak, the off peak, and the PM peak. And we also got the variation in speed because we have across the express lane network, we have speeds of 55 up to 75 miles an hour. So the Iron Stripe team loaded up in their car. They drove all of these. What is it? 321 different drives, 321 different data points. From those data points, they chop it down there. They parsed it down to how much time it took at each speed. At the 75 mile an hour speed and the 65 mile an hour speed, they found that it was about 13.6 seconds that you needed to make that maneuver. So they took all of that, and there's some tables that I'll show you that'll the outcomes of that. But we also had them sit and observe how traffic was flowing through the ingress egresses, particularly like related to buses on the I-25 North corridor. And try and you know, get the data to reflect accurate links for buses too. So I'll emphasize this again. We didn't have any substandard designs. The goal of this was really to improve driver comfort. And so that should really be like the first bold point in the outcomes there, but I didn't put on there. But going into the next slide, Simon, we can go through. So this is the draft guidance. The goal, overarching goal here was to produce a design letter from CTIO to CDOT, to the CDOT projects on what the minimum should be and what the recommended length should be. So these are some excerpts from that design memo that, you know, this first one is the lengths. So this is looking at that 13.6 seconds at the various speed limits, and the various different ingress, egress types, what the recommended lengths our study is showing. And if we move on, so that first one was the length of the ingress. This one is like how I had said in the previous slide that Ashton was recommending a 500 foot per lane change minimum. This is our revised guidance for Colorado. And you could see, like, depending on the speed and the number of lane changes that you have, these are our recommendations. And then lastly, taking those recommendations, applying it back to the inventory that we have across the express lanes corridor. These are the recommended changes, and I'll add, I didn't say this yet, segment 6, 7, and 8 was part of the study. So these are the recommended changes. These are the only ones in the express lanes network currently that need to be improved to meet our new driver comfort standards. And so segment 6, 7, and 8 is already being implemented by the project team up there.
It's great.
Segment 2, we'll be looking at doing that with the striping project with Region 1 this summer. I'll say this, segment 2, these are exit type egresses from the express lane. They're a little less complex to implement because we don't need overhead signing. Overhead signing adds large complexities and cost, but large complexities to implementing or changing the ingresses or egresses. But so this is the one that segment 2, this is the one, in between 84th and Thornton Parkway, that we've talked about in the past. We'll be looking at, as I said, extending that one, lengthening those egresses, providing more distance to the interchanges as that Region 1 striping project comes under award right now. So it'll be at some point before temperatures hit in the winter.
I want to thank you for that. I'm not surprised that we weren't within the scope of where we needed to be to begin with. I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what I would expect.
It's a very good point. I mean, this slide summarizes all of the change or all of the improvements that we'd be looking at. And it's very small and really across the whole network. It's really 2 locations, and then US 36 is on there too. We included them in the study. We'll make this recommendation to them. It's somewhat up to plenary to implement that. But yeah, across our network.
But I do think making these changes go a long way to people knowing that you're hearing them. And I think part of the issue on that segment 2 is the variable speeds that people go, and you're trying to cross out of a speed into the next lane, which is going really, really fast and beyond, and it doesn't feel safe to people. And I think that's the response that's the best possible thing. And I think the North Area Transportation Alliance is going to be really happy with this, because this is the thing I have heard the most in every monthly meeting I go to. It is the feeling of being unsafe and how do I get where I need to go? So I think the 2 pieces where you're changing where the access and egress is, and then putting the signage up in a place a little bit farther in so that they have a little more time to think, okay, got to look at the traffic pattern, got to get in there. So I appreciate that a lot. And I'm sure this instance on segment 2 has worked well to make sure that this doesn't happen initially on 6, 7, and 8, because you've already anticipated you're probably going to get the same thing on 6, 7, and 8.
And I loaded in the van with the team. We had 12 engineers in a 15-passenger van, and we drove 6, 7, and 8 was our kind of kickoff.
I so appreciate that. I can't tell you. Director Gutierrez.
I want to tell you that how much I appreciate, because I had started hearing early on about those ingress, egress discomfort levels. And I want to tell you how much I appreciate when I visit with those folks up there, that your responsiveness has been tremendous.
Yeah.
And I realize that there's the book answer, and your responsiveness to go out there and get to the comfort level is to be complimented, and kudos to you. Thank you.
And the quick implementation of there is kudos to the construction team too.
Sure.
The contractor was able, it's a change order. It's a little more money for them, but they were able to implement it very quick. So.
Director Noble.
The introduction slide to this section is express lane ingress egress confusion. And I think what you talked about here are important things about comfort. Do I have enough time to get out? And very important design things, but they don't yet talk about confusion. There are things that would lead to unsafe behavior, trying to change too many lanes at once, or deciding not to use the express lanes because when it comes time for your exit, you won't be able to get out. I assume next you're going to talk about confusion.
I do have a couple slides, specific examples in here of some confusing areas or perceived confusing areas.
Because that's important to me. I think there are the things in driver's ed about the white line and the dot next to it, in the moment, do you recall that? What can we do to better implement the principle of least surprise? So
Sure.
people know what they should do.
And so that's a great lead into the next section here. So before we kind of dive into that pre-treat direct and noble, I'm going to talk about some of the improvements that we're also going to make to C470. This is related. This probably doesn't quite hit on the confusion piece yet. The second one there, the entrance from 85 to Santa Fe hits on the confusion piece a little bit, but the first one talking about the westbound section between I-25 and Quebec. A lot of people aren't willing to commit to that direct connect until they see the traffic backup. So it's been and then there's also no entrance from Yosemite into the express lane westbound. So we're working with Region 1. I think we're very close to a conceptual buyout, and then we'll be moving into a design project to add an ingress between I-25 and Quebec. I'm not 100% confident we're going to be able to accommodate the Yosemite ramp just because of the geometry like we talked about in the previous slide with the lengths and real estate that we have there. But we are looking at providing that ingress to relieve the GPs for one, to get people who would be willing to pay the toll to save the time and take that congestion out of the GPs. So that I don't really have a time frame for this one. I would hope that we're in construction next season, next spring. US 85, this is in the eastbound direction. Now moving on to the second bullet there in the middle. This is the eastbound direction. If you head eastbound from US 85 Santa Fe, there is no entrance into the express lane until you get up around Broadway. It's about a 2.5 mile stretch. It's also a state highway. We're currently, it's an exit only and egress from the express lane at Lucent. And this is one of the confusing ones that I'm going to dive into in the next slide here, but we are looking at making that one, converting that one from an exit only and egress only to a combined egress and ingress. So that'll help with the confusion, but I'll move into the next slide here and talk a little bit more. I guess before you do that, Simon, I'll just say the confusion that we're hearing from drivers is they never crossed a double line. The signs weren't against crossing the double line. They claim they never crossed the double line. And they say that it's unclear that it was a dedicated exit or entrance. I would say, and we'll move into the next slides and show some of this, but it's true. The drivers never technically crossed a double line. However, they went counterflow to the signing and striping pavement markings that are out there. So Simon, if you go to the next slide. This particular example is eastbound and it's west of Santa Fe. See, as you're in the middle picture, as you're heading up the screen, so to say, you're headed eastbound. If you're in the express lane, the two red arrows that I've shown show the striping to get out of the express lane. And actually step back 1 second. The sign on the left side defines it as an exit, local exit to Santa Fe and Lucent. So the striping opens up, dashes in the express lane side to get into the GPs. The middle lane is transition lane to decelerate potentially or match traffic in the GPs for a safe transition into or out of the express lane. Then the striping opens up stripes to get, skips to get into the GPs. We also have the pavement arrows that also dictate the flow in these areas. So what's really happening is, like, if you take a look at where that semi truck is, right about where that arrow's at, a vehicle traveling in the general purpose lane didn't see the sign that says local exit, They didn't see the pavement arrow showing the flow direction. And they did make a legal maneuver to cross over the dashed line. And now they're in that transition lane. They've made the decision to cross the solid line and get into the express lane. So given that example, the improvements that we are looking to make with the striping project this summer is to add more of these flow arrows so that as a car comes through there, they at least have to drive over one of those flow arrows. And then we're also, a new proposal that came up yesterday was to like you see and kind of the express pavement marking on the express lane side. We're also looking in addition to the flow arrows of doing some type of pavement marking that says exit only or something along those lines. We haven't quite finalized that detail yet, but.
Director Noble.
So imagine if you were on the right-hand side here and you know the express lane is to your left and you want to enter it and you're on the lower part of the diagram, there's the double white line. You're not crossing the double white line. You see the double white line ends. I agree with you that you're ignoring the arrow or whatever, but the double white line is ended, so you want to move into it. My question is, at and above on this diagram, the word express, should that white line be a double white line?
So, and that was actually, it's a very good observation, because that's what I wanted to do initially. Because then it stays consistent with the signing. Excuse me. Looking at that with the traffic engineer, they have told me that they can't do that because it reduces the lane width too much.
Yeah, and then you won't be able to exit as well. If you have a double, means you can't exit or exit.
The sort of the wedge-shaped double lines in the lower part of the image bend to the right, so you can exit where that arrow is.
You would have to cross in that skipped area.
Yeah. Well,
Which is what the design is for.
Yeah.
I would agree with your initial thought that if the double line was there in the upper part of the diagram, north of, and maybe there's a little gap, but above the word express, it would be more obvious to a driver that you cannot treat that as an entrance.
I do agree, but it does limit the lane width, which the traffic engineer was not willing to support.
Yeah, Director.
I'm a little worried about time. I foolishly made a commitment for 11:30 ahead of Jeff Tag. And we've got so much to go, just worried
Yep.
about that.
And I can breeze through the next slide. It's essentially the reverse example. The only thing that I wanted to point out is the signing. So if it's an entrance, it's going to have this sign. If it's not an entrance, it's gonna have that exit sign on the left-hand shoulder. So that's really all I wanted to point out in this slide is.
Well, thank you for all your work on this. It's responsive and we really appreciate it. Okay, dispute resolution. Who's that one?
That is going to be me.
That's you, okay.
In the interest of time, I am going to buzz through these and we
Yeah.
will be having time in the
Yeah.
executive session to answer and ask questions. All right, so. All right, so this is just where the beginning of the program started with all violators getting this warning mailed to them in lieu of a civil penalty that was gonna be due. Next slide, Simon. So basically, the process that happens, and we'll go into more detail in the next slides are, you get a notice of violation that you receive, and there's the dispute process, there's the appeal process, and there's the payment or collection process. I'm gonna go through to the next slide, Simon. So this is actually an actual notice of civil penalty, and the way we mail those is we have a connection with the DMV or third parties lookups that provide who is the registered name and address for that plate number, and that's who by statute, we are supposed to be sending the violation to. And this violation notice will have one or more violations on it. We use a weekly batch process so that we issue notices weekly instead of on a daily basis. That reduces our printing and postage costs. The civil penalty for each violation is $75. And if payment is not made within 20 days, I think there's a typo on our slide saying 30 days, but the civil penalty will escalate to 150 after that 20-day period. We're going to go to the next slide. After the person receives their violation notice in the mail, they have the opportunity to dispute that violation. They can file those disputes online or by calling the customer service center notice number or number on the notice. And the violator may also request a hearing with an independent administrative hearing officer. You want to go to the next slide, Simon? So when the person decides to file a dispute, the violator has logged into the website. They're able to choose from a list of reasons why they don't feel that they should have to pay for this violation. We are only allowed through our statute to dismiss a violation if the vehicle was sold prior to the date and time of the violation. If it was stolen prior to the date and time of the violation, if there's a bankruptcy that the person or the entity is going through, or if they've died. And the website has the functionality so that each of these valid dispute reasons require a certain documentation. And the website has the functionality for that person to upload that documentation. If you want to go to the next slide, Simon, once that dispute is received, people in the back office, they review what the dispute reason is. They verify that the documentation that was submitted is sufficient, is genuine and not forged, and they make a dispute. They make a decision whether to dismiss that civil penalty for that person, or if they are going to deny that based on the conditions, whether the documentation has not met standards, or if we hear a lot of disputes in the other category saying, I wasn't driving the vehicle. That is not a dispute reason that we are allowed to use. Our statute specifically says that the responsible party is who the notice of civil penalty is issued to, and the definition of the responsible party is the name and address on record with the Department of Motor Vehicles. If the customer has their dispute denied, they have the option to request a hearing. They can do that online, or they can call the customer service and schedule a hearing with one of those administrative hearing officers. Okay, Doug, if you want to go to the.
Can I ask a clarification on dispute review process that's that goes through customer service? Those disputes are only the ones that are listed in contesting the violation. Is that right? If they say, I didn't see the line, I had to avoid an accident or anything like that, it goes to adjudication. No, there's other things they can allow it to be.
Well, they can use the other option and then put that detail in there, but those are the ones that are the most likely to be
Denied.
because they don't fall within
Okay.
those reasons that we are allowed to
Thank you.
dismiss. Okay, so we are on slide. So the hearing officers that are reviewing these civil penalties, whether it's a civil penalty that the customer has received a dispute denial on, and their next step of the appeal process is to request a hearing with that administrative hearing officer. These hearing officers, they are contracted through legal firms, and they are acting as an independent third-party fact finder. They are not CTIO employees. They are members of the legal community, and they are charged with, receiving these civil penalties and reviewing the evidence from both sides and determining if a safety violation occurred. And then they make that final decision as to whether the person is liable or not liable. If they are found liable, $30 for that to cover the adjudication costs is added to the amount that they owe. But if they're found not liable by the hearing officer, their entire civil penalty that went to the hearing officer is dismissed, and they are not charged a $30 fee at all. They do not have to pay if they are not liable. I'm going to go to the next one. Continuing the appeal process, if that violator, they have filed a dispute that was denied, they have requested a hearing with the administrative hearing officer and they're found liable, they can now do the next option in the appeal, which is to appeal to the county court in the county court where the violation occurred. So if I violated down on C-470, that's going to go to Douglas County Court as opposed to Adams County Court. So that stays within the jurisdiction where the violation occurred. And at this point, the Attorney General's office acts as CTIO's attorney in these county court cases. So if you want to move to the next slide, Simon. And then after the county court renders their judgment, either side is able to appeal that judgment to the district court. So if the county court finds the person not liable, CTIO can actually appeal that decision to the district court because we feel that evidence is strong that that person is liable. But then the person can also appeal. So if the county court finds them liable, they still have the option to appeal to the district court. And then after that court renders a decision, they can still appeal to the Colorado Court of Appeals. And then finally, an appeal to the Supreme Court is available to either CTIO or the violator at this point. So want to go to the next one. So the process that I just described only pertains to the violators who contact CTIO and request that hearing. There's a separate process for the people that are receiving violations. They're not calling CTIO to make a payment. They're not filing a dispute. They're not requesting the hearing. They're not requesting a payment plan. We've sent it out and we are hearing nothing from these people. If that civil penalty is not paid, then it will go into what is called the default queue. And so the unpaid civil penalties are then reviewed by these administrative hearing officers, and they make a judgment in default because we don't know how to contact these people other than the mailing address that we send it to. So that's when that default hearing, the judge makes the determination again based on the evidence package that CTIO's back office submitted. They don't have anything from the customer. When it's a requested hearing, the customer can submit their side of the story, their evidence to the administrative hearing officer 72 hours before their hearing. But in a default case, all we have is the evidence package that we would already be presenting as if it were a in-person hearing. So then at this point, after any civil penalty goes to court and to the administrative hearing officer, if it's not paid within 30 days, whether it's a requested hearing and they were found guilty or found liable, or it was a default hearing and they were found liable, within 30 days, they have to pay the civil penalty and the administrative hearing officer fee. And if it's not, then that's when they would go into that collections workflow. And we haven't gone into the collections workflow yet. We are getting that going, and we haven't gone into the DMV hold process as well. So the staff wants to come back to the board with some policy recommendations. Does every vehicle that receives a civil penalty and doesn't pay, do they get a hold on them? Or is that privilege reserved for our special group of habitual violators? So that's something that we would like to come to the board and get some policy recommendations from the board and some guidance as to how do we want to handle collections? How do we want to handle DMV holds? So Simon, if you want to go to the next steps. So the next steps in this program are, we've talked about investing that fine revenue into the more expensive communications and outreach activities. And we've talked about the recommended changes to the ingress and egresses. We're going to spend money on that. Those are the next things that are going to happen. We also have recommendations from the Attorney General's office that we would be implementing. So that's another next step. I just mentioned we're going to review and update the business rules around collections activity and DMV hold activity. We also want to consider the constituent and legislator feedback on fines. For example, some of the things that have been suggested are if there's multiple violations in a day, should they be aggregated and there's a cap on how many violations you can receive in a single day or on a single notice. So those are some ideas that we are going to be mulling over. We want to, staff wants to bring a draft of a debt and revenue collections policy to the board. And we also want to explore what our options are around more flexibility around those dispute reasons. Currently, by statute, we can only dismiss based on those reasons. And so there's some, we want to see what options are available to give us more flexibility to dismiss besides those reasons. Simon, I am done. Any questions? It's been a very robust discussion, and I really appreciate the board's interest and involvement.
I think it's great. I'm wondering when you're going to ask us for some direction on this, because I'd like to see it sooner than later. Would you not all? Yeah.
I think
so.
I think the debt policy is already in process. It needs to be obviously reviewed by our controller, the state controller, and just to make sure it's in line with, state fiscal policies.
Yes.
So that's something, we are actively working on these things. I think, we could probably bring the recommended criteria for the DMV holds and the collection thresholds next month. That's something that we're already thinking about. So I think we want to now bring you smaller chunks, in the next couple of months. Based on those next steps, I certainly think, an update on the ingress egress, where we are with that, especially, as John moves on to Region 1, he'll probably still be looped into that a little bit. So yeah, I think we can definitely commit to bringing you all updates, regularly on some of these items for your feedback, so we can start moving forward with that kind of phase 2 of the collections and the DMV holds.
Well, that'd be great. Into Director Adams' point, running this starting into collections and what do we do when people are re-registering, because time is of the essence to do that. And I think the other things certainly are worth another robust discussion on the violations and whether there's a maximum that should be, or if it's one day. All of those things have been things that people have asked me as well. And I say, we're looking at all this. It's a new system we're evaluating. So anybody else?
I just want to compliment Kelly, you and your team, and Roman for the help you guys are providing to us. Just recalling where we were when we started some of these conversations, and we were leaning heavily on the other guys at C470. So we've come a long way. And I'm amazed at just how much you've absorbed about all of this, and just little things. I mean, that even a comment about just the 500 feet per lane. I mean, just little things that once you understand them better, you have a better appreciation for what's gone into how you thought about this from a safety, security, you know, all the different aspects. So I appreciate all that you guys have done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, in the interest of time, we're 5 minutes beyond when we're supposed to be, so let's move on then. And it is commercial back office procurement update and process. I'll start with Piper.
Yeah, before, Kelly's and Rami are gonna take the lead on this, but I just wanted to sort of let the board know what our thinking was with this agenda item, and especially with the resolution, right? Because the
Right.
resolution is a little outside of the norm of what we bring you all. So, knowing that we were, that Kelly and team were sort of reaching the end of, the procurement process and the RFP evaluations, we started talking internally, and especially with the AG's office around, given the significance of this, of what we're procuring, right? A tolling back office is at the core of our business. The significant financial investment that this was gonna require, the length of term of the contract, and really the engagement that we've had with the board over the past 2+ years leading up to this process, right? You all have had significant input into the strategy, how we structured the procurement. So we sort of were talking about, well, what is the board should approve something, right? That there needs to be a closure to the procurement process. But in the bylaws, right, that it's pretty clear that right now the enterprise board sets and approves budgets, right? And you've authorized the director to sign and approve contracts. So generally, we don't bring you specific contracts for approval. So we thought we wanted to at least memorialize the process and have the board approve the process that we went through, recognizing that it's been robust, it's been competitive, it's met above probably industry standards. And so just really acknowledging the process that we went to get to a preferred vendor. So I think our intention was to have a public session on, let's close the loop on the process. These were the goals. This is what we followed, and here's how we got to, and an acknowledgement from the board via our resolution that, we authorize the director to enter into a contract. And then obviously an executive session will provide a lot more specifics on, who the outcome of the procurement. So that was sort of our thinking with how we structured the materials for this, and as well as kind of how we structured the resolution. So I appreciate some of the board questions that have come up around this, and I think that was sort of our thinking. So I just wanted to, set that tone before Kelly dove into the specifics, but happy to answer obviously any questions on sort of what you're being asked to approve in the resolution.
Thank you. And I'm assuming that your conversations with Director Erickson has given her the information that we now have E470 doing our back office, and we are looking to do a back office vendor for us specifically that's not shared with
I think
E470.
Simon and I touched on this
Okay, good.
for a minute, but I do think, Director Erickson, Kelly and Rami and the team, we probably need to meet with you, to give you a little bit more background. I think that's why we put in sort of a little bit of a background
Yeah.
slide too. But yeah, Director Erickson, I think we do need to meet with you offline.
It's complicated.
It's a little
and,
complicated,
and
but,
unusual in
yeah.
that we're doing this, and it's unprecedented
Right,
really
right.
for the way we have run express lanes.
Right.
Okay, good. Well, let's move
Right.
on then.
Right. Did you have a question?
I was taken aback a little bit about how opaque it was, but, Piper responded to an email, really appreciated that. And one thing is that we newbies, or relatively new, weren't part of much of that process. And so,
Oh, right.
and I'm unaccustomed to a contract of this amount not coming before the governing body, but I've not been on an enterprise board before too. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the extra steps made to.
Yeah, and I appreciate the comments. I think we've been talking about it so much internally, and I talked with Chair Stewart about how do we approach this. So, but where you will have approval is through the budget.
Mhm.
And as we work on executing this contract, we will bring you, the financial side of this will certainly be in the board's purview via the budget. So we will bring you an amended budget to reflect kind of upcoming costs, and we'll talk a little bit about those in the executive session too. So I really do appreciate your email. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's move on.
All right, so this is just an update to let you know what we've been doing since the last time we updated you. For the newbies, I did want to just give a quick overview on what we were procuring. We were procuring a commercial back office system. And that would be the software, the websites, the phone system, the IVR. So that's the system. It's the system that allowed payments to be made, but we were also procuring the operations side of it, which is the people answering the phones, the people reviewing the images, the people in finance running the reports. It's just all the people capital that makes a back office work for us. Just some of the activities that the back office does, I mentioned, it's the customer service system and it's the customer service representative and anything related to call center activities. It's image review and validation of the license plates, so that we can send bills to the people that don't have a prepaid toll account. It includes mailing out transponders to people that request them, and it processing those carpool transactions, and it's applying payment to the correct toll transaction. So we began this procurement in 2022 with a request for qualifications from interested vendors with an anticipated notice to proceed by 2024. So we are probably 30 to 60 days to the right of that. We are in July and we have just selected a, preferred proposer, but we're not ready to give notice to proceed yet. So we're thinking hopefully by September, we'll have notice to proceed. So that is the 2-year process that we've done. Simon, if you want to move on. As Piper mentioned, we structured the RFP so that we would end up with a system that met the goals that we had going into the procurement. We wanted a system that was flexible, it was robust, it was scalable to meet the future needs of CTIO as well as CDOT. Some of the things that CTIO can provide to CDOT is a back office to handle parking at dinosaur lots, to handle EV charging up in sections 6, 7, and 8. So we wanted to be able to have a back office that would allow CTIO to be a tool that CDOT can use. But we also wanted to know, we also know that technologies are advancing at such a rapid speed. If we wanted to incorporate a technology that's not even on the market today, we didn't want to have to rebuild the entire back office system so that we could incorporate those new technologies. We wanted full access and visibility of all the data and the processes and full lifecycle auditing of transactional data. We are starting to get more data from the safety enforcement program. We're getting more data from our next gen lane system. You're starting to see those charts. You're starting to see decisions made off of data that we've been able to collect. And we want to continue that around customers that are our customers through our own back office. And we also wanted a contract that was performance-based and that it had to adhere to key performance indicators or KPIs. And then we wanted to have a system where we could, we're obviously anticipating that our vendors will continue to meet KPIs, but if they don't, do we have a system for assessing liquidated damages in case those KPIs aren't met? So those are the background and the goals for this back office that we procured. I now want to go into what steps we took in this 2-year journey. And this was activities that the CTIO staff engaged in as part of the procurement process. So as Piper mentioned, step 1 was we held 6 internal workshops with the board before we did anything to make sure that our procurement was aligned with the board's directions. Step 2, we engaged with the tolling industry, both with tolling vendors and with peer agencies, to provide details on what CTIO was interested in procuring and we wanted to garner interest from vendors. And we wanted to get feedback from our peer agencies that were either currently going through a procurement for a back office or had just finished one, and get their lessons learned before we wrote the RFP. And so step 3 was then we started the procurement with a formal request for qualifications in June of 2022. So we wanted to use that request for qualifications to shortlist vendors that would be eligible to submit proposals. We, as a result of step 2, where we engaged the tolling industry, we had 14 vendors submit statements of qualifications. And CTIO staff, from that pool of 14, we selected 4 of those vendors to shortlist. Step 4 was to engage in a draft RFP / receive feedback cycle with the shortlisted vendors. So what that meant was our procurement team, heavy with Rami's team, making that the scope of work and everything related to a RFP. They put together what they indicated would be what we wanted in that RFP. Then we released that RFP to those 4 shortlisted vendors. We had in-person meetings with them. We had question and answer sessions with them. We had, the vendors had the opportunity to submit written questions and comments. And so after we received those, we took what we could incorporate into the RFP. We, obviously there were going to be some things that we could not, but we incorporated those things from the first round of comments, sent out a second draft to those 4. And they saw what we were able to incorporate, what we couldn't incorporate. We again received feedback and comments from the same cycle that we did the first time around. We did that twice before we put out the final version of that RFP that these 4 shortlisted vendors were going to be proposing from. This included a mostly complete contract so that the vendors who were proposing knew what the contract was going to be that they were entering into. We had vetted this contract, the terms of the contract, through the AG's office, through the state controller's office. So we feel that having the vendors already knowing what's in that contract was going to expedite the timeframe from selecting the vendor at the end of the process and getting to that notice to proceed, instead of, receiving the proposal and then entering into a year-long contract negotiation phase. So we released the final version that they were going to propose from on November 3rd. And then if you'll go to the next slide, we received the proposals back from them in March. But before we issued the final draft of the final version of the RFP, the CTIO back office team that was involved in that procurement, we spent some time in the summer of 2023 traveling. We went to each of the shortlisted vendors where they either had their system in operation at a peer agency, or they had the operations portion, which was the call center staff and all that. So we went and visited, how many, Rami, did we visit?
2.
2 in person, one virtual. And then some of our vendors that were on the short list, their system or their operations were in a foreign country, in Europe. And we were not allowed as employees of the state to travel there. So we actually did virtual back office immersion, so that it was very interesting how each of the different vendors handled those virtual opportunities for us to see their product, their services in action. So it was a very robust, we call it the back office immersion. We didn't want to just hear the vendors talk about their product. We wanted to talk to the boots on the ground. We weren't there with their executive team and a PowerPoint presentation. We were in the call center floor. We were talking with the boots on the ground. How's the system? How's the company to work for? We really wanted to make sure that we did our due diligence in selecting a vendor for this. So like I mentioned, we put the RFP out on November 3rd of 2023, and we received proposals from 2 of the 4 vendors in March. And so then step 7 was, as part of the evaluation process, we gave those 2 proposers over 100 use cases in about 3 months to put together a mini system or make sure that they could show us. And these were just basic things. These weren't the wild and crazy stuff that I want in there, but this was, how do you open an account? How do you take a payment? How do you reconcile at the end of the day? What do your reports look like? So we had the proof of concepts demos were several days long. Each vendor had their own week that they did their proof of concept for us in June. And so the scoring of those proof of concepts was actually part of the technical proposal. Yeah, we wanted to make sure that the system they were going to give us was user-friendly, was efficient, was modern. So those are the types of things that were scored. So the last step was to take the evaluation. And we had 2 separate CTIO evaluation teams. We had a technical evaluation team and we had a financial evaluation teams. And these teams were supported by advisory committees. We had the legal advisory committee. We had the financial advisory team and we had the technical advisory team. And the scoring weights were designed so that CTIO received the highest technical quality system and operations at the fairest price. So the technical score consisted of a separate score for the technical proposal, that was the written part that they submitted, and a separate score for that proof of concept demo that they did. And together, those 2 made up the technical score that counted for 80% of the total weighted score, with the financial proposal receiving the other 20% of the weighted score. The scoring is done. And we will be going into executive session, so you guys can ask questions and we can tell you who that successful proposer was. And we will be announcing the preferred proposer on July 12th by posting it on the CTIO board website.
Okay, any other comments or questions before we talk about the resolution? It's understood.
I just wanted to add one thing. I was not part of the RFP process deliberately. But I did have unsolicited, the legal advisory team, many of the advisory teams reached out to me personally to let me know how incredible the team did. They were locked in a room for weeks at a time. Jamal, Josh, John, Kelly, Simon, Rami. So I just want the board to know that, these advisors help lots of states with this type of work, especially the legal team, and they were very impressed with the level of diligence that the team put in. So I just wanted the board to know that was the feedback I was getting too.
That's great. Thank you. So the process that we need to move forward with now is to offer a motion to accept resolution 448. Resolution 448 really is our acknowledgement that we believe this is a fair process, that we've done everything that we are required to do as the CTIO board of directors, and that we agree that, with the assistance of expert consultants, HPTE staff has met the goals and objectives for competitive, robust procurement process, and we authorize, Piper Darlington or her designee to execute the final negotiated contract. And so that would be the, motion in front of us. Is any questions or comments before we ask for a motion to approve? All right, so a motion to approve is in order.
I move to approve resolution 448.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstention? All right, that passes unanimously. So now we will go into executive session that will be closed to the public, and I'm going to read the executive session direction. We need a motion to enter into executive session. This is Karen Stewart, Chair of the High Performance Transportation Enterprise Board of Directors. It's July 10th, 2024. The time is now 10:55. The HPTE Board of Directors is convened for its July 10th, 2024 board meeting. The agenda calls for an executive session pursuant to sections 24-6-402, paren 3, paren A, paren 2, and paren 3, and 24-72-204, paren 3, paren A, paren 4. The Colorado Revised Statutes for the purpose of discussing matters subject to HPT solicitation for a tolling back office provider and associated wind down provisions with E470 and matters related to the Express Lane Safety Enforcement Program active litigation. And I think at this point, we ask people who are not to be in the room to leave. I would ask for a motion to convene HPTE Board of Directors in executive session. Okay?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Joel Noble made the motion and seconded by Shelley Cook, and call for discussion. All right, all in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Seeing none, that does meet the 2/3 vote requirement for membership of the board. Motion passes by 2/3 vote of the board, actually by unanimous vote of the board. Board has concluded its public business and will now convene in an executive session. Everyone present should state their name for the record. So before we do that, is anybody leaving this room before we have our executive session? Okay, so I'll start. Karen Stewart, Chair of CTIO HPTE.
Cecil Gutierrez, Board of Directors, CTIO, HPD.
Carla Martin, Attorney General's Office.
Joshua Cockey, Attorney General's Office.
Joshua Dre, CTIO. Jamal Yarber, CTIO.
John Gregory, CTIO.
Alex Franks, CTIO.
Joel Corley, CTIO.
Kathy Young, Attorney General's Office.
Tim Hoover, CDOT Communications.
Eli Adams, CTIO Director.
Joel Noble, CTIO Director.
Piper Darlington, CTIO.
Shelley Cook, CPIO Director.
Simon Living, CTIO.
Kelly Brown, CPIO.
Ronnie Hart, outside consultant.
And Nisa?
Lisa Erickson, CTIO Director.
Thank you. This is Karen Stewart, Chair of the High Performance Transportation Enterprise Board of Directors. It's July 10th, 2024. We're now in executive session for the purpose of discussing matters subject to negotiations regarding C470 financing. Is that right? No.
And also to receive legal advice on the.
On back office procurement. Perfect, thank you.
The Express Lane Safety Enforcement Program.
As we conduct this executive session, we confine the discussion to the topic announced. We won't make any final decisions or vote in the executive session. So I'll turn that over to whoever's running the executive session.